The big story since last night for the world of technology. The US Department of Justice, as had been expected for some time now, has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google. A lawsuit that Google has hit back describing as deeply flawed. In this lawsuit, the Department of Justice has made a case against Google for allegedly abusing its position of dominance, of stifling smaller competitors. What has been under scrutiny is the Google search engine and its advertising policy. More than that, it has gone into the fact that Google pays smartphone manufacturers to put its apps front and center, basically again at the cost of other app developers. This is the biggest lawsuit against a technology giant since 1998, so the largest since the one we saw against Microsoft. That was in the court for years and finally had resulted in a settlement of sorts, with Microsoft paying penalties. I'm going to be taking this conversation forward with Ray Wang, who's joining us from Silicon Valley. He's once again woken up early to be a part of this live broadcast, which we really appreciate. So Ray, once again, thank you for being a part of this show. The lawsuit has been in the works for some time. You had seen investigation for over a year. News did come out that 11 Republican state attorney generals would also be becoming plaintiffs for this lawsuit. Google has, of course, responded. My first question to you is, what has been the reaction in the United States, in Silicon Valley, the tech sector at large? Because whatever is decided, whichever way it goes, this lawsuit, it's going to have massive ramifications.
You know, it's a great point. I think it's in early days in terms of thinking about the lawsuit. There hasn't been much of a major reaction here in the Valley. People know that the lawsuit's been going on for a year. This suit was also started during the Obama administration, where the Department of Justice, the investigation was started during the Obama administration, but that didn't go anywhere as well. So I think the mood here is we're going to wait it out and see what happens.
But you know, Ray, it's also coming after those, shall I call it famous or infamous congressional hearings where you saw the top bosses of the world's largest tech companies being summoned. After that, you know, so much has been written about the various processes they follow, the rules that they follow, their policies, how they might be interacting with each other at the cost of others. All of that we've been hearing since the congressional hearings. So this is not a case of Washington versus Silicon Valley, because it will have ramifications.
In the long run, yes, there will be ramifications. I think, from my analysis, the Department of Justice lawsuit is actually too narrow. It looks at one area, which is search, where Google is dominant. But what's actually happening in the world of digital giants is there are multiple monetization models. You have search, you have advertising, you have memberships, you have subscriptions, you have digital goods, and you have services. And I think what we're going to discover through the course of the lawsuits is that each one of these digital giants has an area where they're dominant, but they monetize in other areas. I'll give an example. Amazon is known as the dominant one in commerce, but it's also going into advertising. And because of its size, it can actually compete with Google and Facebook for ad dollars. And so you're going to see this mix and match that's going to occur. And so just saying that because Google has a dominance in search, it has 95% of the traffic in the United States, it takes 1/3 of all the digital advertising revenues, may not be enough, because in a justice lawsuit and a justice suit on competition, it's about the customer benefit. Are the customers still benefiting? Can competitors emerge into the market? Are they trying to defend their market share? And if you're just going after search, it might not be enough of an argument, even though they're a digital giant and even though they're wielding some monopolistic power.
Okay. So then when you say that it is too narrow, what Google is claiming is that this entire lawsuit is deeply flawed, and it's making a case that what the Department of Justice wants would actually be anti-consumer. It's going to lead to a price rise, and that is doing nothing wrong. What is so wrong? And compares itself to a cereal company, how cereal companies pay supermarkets for, you know, eye-level shelf space, and that's exactly what it's doing with the smartphone manufacturers.
It's actually a pretty good argument saying that, look, we're paying for positioning inside a store. We're paying for positioning for display. So just like when you walk into a store shelf, you might have a certain soda, a certain beer manufacturer that has prominent display. You pay the retailer for that access to that capability to be able to, I put your item in front of someone. That's what they're claiming for browsers or being access to the browsers, especially in this case, Apple's Safari browser as the preloaded item, actually not bundled. I think I'd be very careful there. And like the Microsoft case, people try to liken to that. The Microsoft case was different because it was about bundling. This is about product placement. I think they split the lines pretty clear here in that argument. Now, could some other vendor, try to compete and say, I'm going to put more money to have product placement inside Apple or product placement inside whatever future browser that, that emerges? That's definitely an argument that says, look, that's open competition. Whoever pays the most actually has access. It's the same thing as trying to get, Champion League football advertising rights. You pay more, you get it, you bid for it. It's an open process. And so I think those are the argument lines that the Google lawyers are going after.
But the smartphone manufacturers, which might be being paid for putting Google's apps that the DoJ describes as front and center, are also using the Android operating system, right? So why does Google have to even pay them for that?
Well, once again, I mean, it's the phone manufacturers actually have control over their devices. So, for example, in this phone that we're looking at, in each of the phones, I mean, they control what actually gets put up first. And so that's up to the manufacturer of the phone to make that determination. So, whether you're Samsung, whether you're Apple, maybe you're a PC manufacturer like Acer or HTC. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. The bottom line is they control what gets pre-delivered and put out. And people pay for placement.
Something else that I want to ask you, Ray, when it comes to this and what the Department of Justice has claimed, and I've been reading about this in all the global reports, etc., is talking about the exclusionary practices of Google at the cost of smaller competitors. It's also talking about deals with Apple. What did you make of that? And then why should the antitrust lawsuit, and I'm asking a cheeky question here, that if it's saying that you're seeing collusion, alleged collusion, or deals between Google and Apple, then why are you only scrutinizing Google and going after Google and not Apple?
I think there's a lot more to this case that's going to be revealed over the next few weeks. This is just the opening salvo. The Department of Justice has done a lot of research over the last year. They've been setting up inquiries, asking about how these different business models work. And that's why they're looking at that piece. There's a lot of other areas. I think, you see the investigation into Apple trying to figure out App Store entry, charging the 30%. But once again, right, with each one of these, you have to look to see if consumers have been harmed. As that's part of the antitrust precedent. If consumers have been harmed, if competitors can't get access to markets, if competitors can't go into other routes. As a competitor, you don't necessarily need Google to be able to go to market. You have the internet as a distribution mechanism, and that's what people will argue. Now, the reality is it's very hard because the first gateway into the internet is typically a search engine, and if the dominant search engine is Google versus Bing versus something else, that becomes part of that process. It could also be in the browser side of the wars, whether Firefox bundles something with someone else versus Google paying Firefox to bundle Google search. You'll see all those types of deals be revealed if those are true. And I think that's what they're getting at the heart of. If a new competitor was to emerge in the market in the browser wars or in the search market, would they be able to compete effectively against Google?
Okay, so let's see how this one pans out. And of course, I found it very interesting how Google, in its statement, and ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't read it, it's on social media, Twitter handle of Google, all of that. They've actually said, hey, we follow the best practices, and they've highlighted examples of how Microsoft, for example, makes its own search engine the default option. So all I can say is I think interesting days, if not years ahead of us. We know how long the Microsoft case, for example, did lag on in the courts. Ray, before I let you go, I have to ask you this one question, especially after what we saw overnight. Are you on Snapchat?
Snap is on fire. I mean, the augmented reality app for anime just kicked butt. And basically what's going on is 3 billion downloads. Everybody's on fire trying to use that. And so therefore, that's been kind of the highlight. But the reality is the digital marketing platform, the advertising platform that matches content with the buyers, that actually is what's been improved. And the advertisers notice that. And so that's why people are using Snapchat. And of course, Snap has like a good number of users. You're sitting at about 249 million users, right? It's, you know, it's half the size of Instagram, but it's still bigger than TikTok. And it's definitely one of the social media darlings right now.
I just want to read out the numbers for the benefit of our viewers. By the way, if you have not been following, Snapchat came out with its numbers and they are absolutely mind-blowing. The revenues have grown 50%. And let me just take you through that. So in the year 2015, in the third quarter, its revenue stood at $16.7 million. In the third quarter 2020, that 16.7 has ballooned to $679 million. It's up from $446 million in the previous quarter. So, you know, and we've seen how the founders' wealth, for example, they've got a massive windfall gain, and why shouldn't they? And finally, can they have the last laugh on rejecting Facebook's offer? Because so much has been said about it. What were these guys thinking?
They definitely can. And I think they're still very attractive to other folks who might want to be able to take advantage of their ability to go up against Instagram, which is 500 million users. But, you know, Snap is growing. They're innovating, especially in the digital advertising world. And that's what matters. And more importantly, right, they're giving users what they want. Back to the point in competition, you really need to have at least 100 million monthly active users to play in this game. And that's what gives you scale. That also gives you efficiencies, both in the advertising side, but also in the social network effects for having some fun.
Ray, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for putting this in perspective for us at Silicon Valley's views on the Department of Justice's lawsuit against Google. And of course, since it happened overnight, we decided to ask Ray about Snapchat as well. With that, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned. We're in the midst of a festive season. The big billion-day sale of Flipkart is over. The numbers are mind-boggling. How much shoppers have spent. Yes, revenge shopping is indeed a real thing. That and more coming up.